In the frozen hills of Korea in 1951, the war had reached a brutal stalemate. Both sides dug into the ridgelines, trading artillery, mortar fire, and small arms bursts for every inch of ground. But for one American officer, a man named Lewis Lee Millett, the answer to breaking through wasn't more firepower. It was something far older, something primal, the bayonet. Lewis Millett was born in Mechanic Falls, Maine in 1920 and grew up during the Great Depression. His family's roots ran deep with service. His grandfather had fought in the Civil War and his uncle in World War I. From a young age, Lewis seemed destined for the Army. He enlisted in 1940, joining the Massachusetts National Guard. But when the United States stayed out of World War II, Millett grew impatient. He couldn't stand sitting on the sidelines while tyranny spread across Europe. So he did something few Americans had done. He deserted the U.S. Army and crossed into Canada, where he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. His reason was simple. He wanted to fight the Nazis. Soon after, when the U.S. entered the war, he transferred back into the American Army, where his combat record quickly began to take shape. During World War II, Millett served as a forward observer and anti-aircraft gunner in North Africa. He was credited with shooting down a German plane, earning the Silver Star for his actions in Tunisia. But his story didn't end there. After the war, he stayed in the Army, a soldier's soldier, committed to the life of service. Then came Korea. By early 1951, Millett was a captain in the 27th Infantry Regiment, the Wolfhounds, part of the 25th Infantry Division. His company was tasked with taking Hill 180, a strategic ridge near the town of Somni. It was a cold February day, and the hill bristled with enemy positions. Chinese and North Korean troops held the high ground with automatic weapons and mortars, waiting for the Americans to climb into the open. The order was simple: take the hill. But the terrain and entrenched defenses made it almost suicidal. Every advance was cut down by intense fire. The attack stalled, and the men hesitated, pinned behind rocks and shallow cover. That's when Captain Millett decided it was time to lead the old way. He stood up in full view of the enemy, bayonet fixed, and shouted for his men to follow. With a blast of his whistle and a roar that echoed across the valley, he charged up the slope, rifle in hand, steel blade gleaming in the winter light. The men of Company E followed their captain. Through a storm of bullets and explosions, they sprinted uphill, closing the distance to the enemy trenches. Millett reached the first enemy position and struck with his bayonet, fighting hand-to-hand as his men swarmed around him. The battle devolved into a savage melee: grenades, rifle butts, bayonets, fists. Millett's courage was contagious. Soldiers who had been pinned moments before now rose and pressed forward. Hill by hill, trench by trench, they drove the enemy back with cold steel and raw determination. In the midst of the chaos, Millett was wounded by grenade fragments in his face and legs. But he refused to stop. He kept moving up the hill, rallying his men and calling out encouragement. By the time it was over, the Americans had taken Hill 180 and killed or driven off every enemy soldier who had defended it. It was one of the last times in U.S. military history that a bayonet charge turned the tide of battle. The old ways, courage, grit, and close combat had triumphed in the age of machine guns. For his incredible leadership and valor, Captain Lewis L. Millett was awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation read that he had personally led his company in a bayonet assault up a heavily fortified hill and inspired his men by his indomitable courage. But Millett wasn't done yet. He continued to serve, later fighting in Vietnam, where he led long-range reconnaissance patrols and trained soldiers in guerrilla tactics. He eventually retired as a colonel, his chest filled with ribbons that told the story of a lifetime of war. When asked years later about the charge on Hill 180, Millett spoke not of glory, but of grit. "We had to take that hill," he said, "so we fixed bayonets and went up. That's what soldiers do." Lewis Millett passed away in 2009 at the age of 88. His legacy lives on, not just in the Medal of Honor he wore, but in the spirit of every soldier who knows that leadership isn't about standing back. It's about standing up. On a cold Korean hillside, when the gunfire wouldn't stop and fear gripped every heart, Captain Lewis Millett showed the world that courage can still charge forward, even when the rest of the world stands still. He led from the front, he fought with honor, and he proved that sometimes the oldest weapons still strike the hardest.